Hello. In this video, we're going to go over the difference between what is called the selection and the direct selection tool. So let's go ahead and get started. I want to create a document. So here I am in the Illustrator home window. I'm going to go ahead and tell it to create new. And for my size, I'm going to go ahead and use, it says under recent. I already have a letter right here, but we could always go under print. And this is where we find the letter. I just like changing my unit of measure from points to inches. And for this one, I'm just going to go ahead and change so that my artboard is in the landscape format. I'm going to select OK, create. So here we have my window. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to close some of these windows here. I'm going to go into Essential Classic and tell it to reset Essential Classics just so that I could have my window at a baseline. So what I want to do, I want to go over how the difference between these two different tools. If you notice on the top left-hand corner of your toolbar, we have two arrowhead tools. The Direct Selection tool, which is a black arrowhead. Keyboard shortcut is the V on your keyboard. And then we have the Direct Selection tool, which is another arrowhead tool that is a white one. And so I want to go over the difference between both of these. But in order to do so, let's create a couple of shapes. I'm going to create them within my artboard, but I want to change the color. I do not want them to be white. Go ahead and choose any color that you like. This time I'm going to switch over here in my toolbar. We have swatches. I'm going to go ahead and select, I'm going to select this light orange color over here for the fill. I could leave it, let's go ahead and change the stroke value as well. Instead of using black, I'm going to use swatches again. And maybe for this one, I will use this CMYK green. And I'm going to go ahead and use my different tools, my shape creation tools. And I'm holding down the mouse button over it. I'm going to go ahead and rip off this menu. I'm going to place right here and go ahead and just create some random shapes. Doesn't matter how many. I'm just going to go ahead and create this one. You know what? I do want to increase the stroke value, so I'm going to go ahead and press up on the stroke right here. It's still selected. I'm just pressing up, increasing the stroke point. So I'm going to go and select a different shape so that I get something like this. Let's go ahead and create a polygon as well. If you want more areas or edges, as you're creating it, press up or down. So maybe 5. If you want to move it as you're creating it, as long as you don't let go of the mouse button, if you press and hold down the space bar, for any object that you create, you could, as you're holding down the space bar and holding down the left mouse button, you're able to change the placement. Once you let go of the space bar, you go back to the creation. So I'm going to put this one there. And let me go ahead and create a star as well. I'm going to click and drag. If you want more or less arms, you could do that as well. So here, I'll just go ahead and create a 5-pointed star. Let go of the mouse button. And now let's talk about your two tools. Let's go ahead and select the selection tool first. When you click on it, and let's go ahead and also look at our layers. I'm going to click on the little, click on this icon to show my layers, and I'm going to click on the little arrow to expand my layer 1 so you can see the objects that I have selected. I want to remind you that you could either select one of these objects by clicking on these circles, and you could see that it will select that corresponding shape. Or with your selection tool, you're able to just click to select that shape. And notice that whenever you select a shape with the selection tool in Illustrator, it creates this bounding box. And that bounding box will allow you to either scale your shape. You could either scale both length and height, or you could just decide to scale one or the other. If you want to scale proportionally, you press and hold down Shift on your keyboard, and you click on one of these corners, and it'll scale your object proportionally. But make sure that when doing so, that you don't let go of your keyboard, your mouse button and your keyboard shortcut at the same time, because here I'm going to let go of Shift, and you can see how kind of it changes. So I often see students who try to let go of the mouse button and the keyboard shortcut at the same time. My suggestion is let go of the mouse button first, and then you can let go of your keyboard shortcut. But you can see how this allows you to manipulate your object entirely, meaning that you're only able to scale, you're able to rotate, and you're able to move it. But what about the actual points along the surface of your path? You're not able to manipulate that information. You cannot do that with the selection tool. The selection tool is good to be able to select the entire object as a whole, but it's not good for allowing you to manipulate the individual points. So, but one of the things that the selection tool is also good at, something that's good with an Illustrator, is that you could also select multiple objects together. I'm going to go ahead and do what's called a marquee selection. If I click and drag, you'll see a rectangle that is being created. But once you let go of the mouse button, anything within this area will be selected. You can see that these two paths, these two objects were within that rectangle marquee that I created, and they're both now selected, and you could manipulate them as a group, as a temporary group. They're only a group because I selected them. If I want to add this one, if I hold down Shift and click on it, it is added to that selection. Notice that this circle is not part of it. I could scale these three shapes down. This is one of the cool things that Illustrator allows you to do. If I want to add this one, I could hold down Shift and just click on it, or I'm going to click out here just to deselect everything. I could just make a big marquee selection and select them. One note about marquee selections is that you don't need to select the entire object. Just by having these two objects within a portion of this little rectangle, they are going to be selected. So I could potentially start right here and go up here, and all four of these objects are now selected. But as I said, the selection tool does not allow you to manipulate this shape. So this is where our direct selection tool comes into play. I'm going to go ahead and click on this tool. What I want to point out, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on one shape for right now. I do have under View, I do have Smart Guides turned on because this is going to help me. What I want to do, if you notice that as you go close along your path, it displays what is underneath your cursor. If I go to these corners, you notice that you have what are called anchors. Go ahead, if you have a rectangle, go to one of these corner points, these anchors, and just click on it once. Click. Because what I want to point out, notice that this one that I just selected, the color might be hard to see. Let me go ahead and change the color. By default, it's blue. If I double click on my layer 1, the color is light blue. Let me select red instead. Maybe this might be easier to see. Yes, it is. There's more contrast here. So you can see my path. I clicked on this anchor, click, and one thing I want to point out is if I look at this anchor, and this one is filled in with whatever color my layer is. But if I look at this other one, I'm not going to select it. I'm just going to hover over it. Notice that this one, it has white in the center, but it still has kind of like a stroke around it. The color of my layer color. This one is not selected. This one is not selected. This one is not selected. Whatever anchor is filled in, that anchor is selected. What I could do now, since I could click on this one, click and drag, and I'm able to change the placement of this anchor point. If I click on this one now and drag, this one is now selected, and I'm able to move it. So with the direct selection tool, this tool allows you to manipulate the anchors that are within your shape. You could also click and drag along the path to change that shape. On a rectangle, I want to point out how this one has what are called corner points. There are your points go from point A to point B to C, etc. So these are straight lines. But what about a curved surface? Say, for example, an ellipse. I'm going to go ahead and move over here to the side. I'm just going to click on this shape. Click. What I want to point out, by clicking on it, notice that all of these anchor points are filled in. That means that they're all selected. I do not want them all selected because if I try to move one, it's going to move all of them because they're all selected. And this kind of gives me the same functionality as my selection tool. But instead, I'm going to click on one of these anchors, click, and notice that because these are curved lines, that they also have what are called handles. The handles are what tell my shape, my curve, which direction they're going. So from this point, notice that the handle says, before I go to the next point, I have this handle determines the direction, and the length is the magnitude, how much influence it has along this curve. If I click and drag this anchor point, you can see how I'm able to change the shape. If I click on this handle, by default, it has like a teeter-totter type of movement. If this handle goes down, the opposite handle goes up. There are ways to break the handle, but that is using a different tool. But right now, before we start breaking these handles, I would just want to go over the functionality of being able to manipulate these shapes. What you're also able to do is I could move this around right here. If I make this smaller, notice that this shape now has less influence before it goes to the next point. You can see how it kind of goes down. If I make this one longer, notice how it has a lot more influence before it goes to the next point. So I'm just going to go ahead and change this around. So what you're able to do at this point, you're able to click on your individual anchor points. You're able to manipulate these shapes. It is possible, I'm going to move this higher, where if you click on one of these handles, if you just drag it all the way back to the point, only one side has a handle. Let's say I want this, there it goes. One side has a handle, the other side has a nice curve. So with the direct selection tool, this shape or this tool allows us to manipulate the information, the individual anchors, or we could also click along the path so that the anchors stay put, and I could manipulate this shape. So say I want this to be a little bit larger, or I want it to go in. You can see how the shapes are kind of flipping around, so I get something that looks like this. I'm going to zoom out. So each one of these has different tools. I can go ahead and click on this one, or different functionality. I want to remind you on some of your shapes, if you see this little circle, that allows you to manipulate the curvature of that point. If I click on this one, it also has one. Now if I want to do all of them, you see how there, I just clicked on the center, or just activating it. If you do not have a center, if you click on the path, let's see. Oh yeah, that's going to make it a little bit difficult because it doesn't show it. This is going to select all of them. Now notice it's still keeping the initial one that I put. Here I'm going to make this one. And now if I select them all. If you only want to select a couple, let me go ahead and put this back. You're able to click on one, hold down shift, and say, I just want three points to be rounded. And now these 2 points are not. The same could be said about the star. Notice how some of these are in the outside and some are in the inside. There you go. But these are the difference between the selection tool. Selection tool allows you to manipulate the entire shape. The direct selection tool allows you to select the individual anchors or pieces that make up your shape. And oftentimes it does take some time to realize what tool you have. Just know that by the color of the tool, the black one is your main selection tool that allows you to manipulate your shape. The white one allows you to manipulate the individual components of that shape. So this we are going to be using the selection tool and the direct selection tool a lot within Illustrator. What I want to point out, another keyboard shortcut that we're going to be making use within Illustrator. Let me just go ahead and switch to a different tool for right now. Even within our, let's say I'm going to use one of my shape building tools. This is something that you'll find with any tool that you use within Illustrator. The last used tool, I'm going to go ahead and select the selection tool, and then I'm going to go ahead and select a shape tool. Keyboard shortcut. On a Mac, if you hold down Alt, on a Mac, if you hold down Command, on a PC, if you hold down Control, the last used selection tool, if you press that keyboard shortcut, it's going to take you to your last used selection tool. In this case, I selected the selection tool. So once I let go, I go back to my tool that I have selected. I'm going to select my direct selection tool, and I'm now going to select a different shape tool. If I press and hold down Command on a Mac, or if I press and hold down Control on a PC, it takes me to my last used selection tool. So in this case, it's the direct selection tool. So what we're going to continue to do from here, we're going to build off of this, and I'm going to go over new tools that allow us to gain more functionality. So if you have any questions, let me know. But otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.